this way, only one works. There we go.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get ready to get started, so if everyone could come and take their seats and make sure you grab a lunch. And I want to welcome everyone to the National Principals Month event on Capitol Hill. I want to thank our host for today, the National Associations of Elementary and Secondary School Principals, and the American Federation of School Administrators for hosting this event. Today, we're going to focus on leveraging principals to retain quality teaching and boost student learning. I am Tiara Booker-Dwyer. I'm the Executive Director for Leadership Development and School Improvement at the Maryland State Department of Education. In my office, we oversee leadership development, everything from the assistant principal on up to the superintendent. We work with that whole continuum of leaders from the aspiring to the retiring. We also oversee the evaluation system for Maryland, and we focus on school improvement. For today, the overarching goal for today is we really want to examine principals' impact on student learning and the importance of federal support to boost this critical role. And I want to start by taking everyone right up 95 to Maryland, to our school system. We have 24 school systems that are with about a little over 1,000 principals. And these principals oversee an instructional staff of a little over 80,000 people. And that includes teachers, teachers' aides, school counselors, everyone who touches a student in a building, these principals oversee. And in Maryland, we enjoyed quite a bit of time as the number one state when it comes to our education system for several years. And then we started to fall. We are currently now number 6. And we had to take a step back to think about, why is this happening? What has happened that allowed us to go from number 1 to number 6? And it all came down to this quote, that every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets. And what we had to readjust our focus, because through Race to the Top, when everybody was racing to the top, we were falling to the bottom. We had a huge focus on our teachers. And we did a lot around teachers, but we didn't do as much as we could have around principals and school leaders. And we know what the research shows, that there is this need to focus on school principals. Principals are the second most important factor next to classroom instruction that impacts student learning. And I would even argue that they're the number 1 factor, because they're the ones who are hiring the people who are leading the instruction. And as we're transitioning to implementing our Every Student Succeeds Act plan, we know that the reforms that we have put in this plan will not be successful if principals are not actively a part of it. And we also know that they were just working at that school level with the principal. We have for establishing that climate to make teachers want to stay in the field, to want to stay in their school, and to do all their great work with teaching students. And when we think about all that principals must do, they must be that, so they're at the core, they're charged with being the instructional leader, with leading that instruction for school. But layered on top of that is that they're managing operations in their building. They're engaging the parent. We all know that if something happens in the school, the parents, they want to speak to the principal. They don't want to talk to the assistant principal or the teacher. They want to go right to the principal. They're managing the finances. They're evaluating the teacher. And they're held accountable for implementing all of the policies and all of the laws that happen. They're on the ground implementing it at the school level. They're overseeing student behavior, and they're also helping to support the preparation of future leaders. So when we think about the role of the assistant principal and how that principal is really that mentor in helping that assistant principal or that future teacher or that teacher leader see what that principal role is like and really preparing them for that. So it's a big role as a principal, and they have a lot to do. And we always tell principals, well, you got to use distributed leadership. You can't do it all on your own. And that sounds great in theory, but what we hear from our principals, especially our principals in our lowest performing schools, is that, yeah, I could do this distributed leadership, but if something falls, if something doesn't go well, it's then blamed on me. It's reflected in my evaluation. It's my job that's on the line. So really, it all stops with the principal. And we try to have a lot of support around them, but it does stop with the principal. And so in Maryland, we're looking at the entire system around that principal so that we can improve our student outcomes. We are focusing on revising our teacher and admin prep programs. We're revising our evaluation system to really focus on professional growth and student learning. We're engaging in a big curriculum vetting initiative through our ESSA plan, because what we know is that we want to make sure that at the school level that high quality materials are being used. We're focusing on customized professional learning experience for principals and leadership coaching. And what the research shows is that focusing on these items, it's a more cost-effective way to maximize your return on investment. And we have a big focus on leadership coaching. So a lot of times people will use their Title II funds for instructional coaches, for teachers, and some things at the classroom level. But we know that our leaders need coaches as well. And we focus on leadership coaching, and we pair it with our professional learning experiences, because we know that with coaching, we know that it's 80 to 90% more likely that whatever professional learning experiences that our principals engage in will actually be applied at the school level with that support of a leadership coach. And that leadership coach is a non-evaluative role. And so the principal isn't in fear that this person is going to evaluate me or this is going to be used against me. It's a true open and honest relationship that's really about supporting principal growth. So there are 3 big programs that we're using our Title II funds on in Maryland to support the growth of school leaders. We have our Promising Principals Academy, which focuses on our future school leaders. Our Leading for School Improvement Institute, which is focused on our principals of our lowest achieving schools. And then we do evaluator training. And with the evaluator training, this is for all principals and assistant principals to really foster the consistent practices in the evaluation process. And without the Title II dollars, we would not be able to do any of this. In our Promising Principals Academy, it's a year-long academy that that each superintendent or CEO of their local school system, they can nominate 2 of the next in line in their school system to be principal. And we started this academy because what we heard from our superintendents is that, we have people going through these admin prep programs at higher ed, but they're still not quite prepared. There's still some gaps there. They're still not ready to deal with budgeting, and they need a little bit of media training, and they need some things to really transition well into that principalship. So this program fills that gap. Our Leading for School Improvement Institute, we know that our principals in our lowest achieving schools need more support. When we look at our current admin prep programs, we don't prepare principals to go into the most challenging schools. We prepare principals for kind of the middle of the road schools. But when you're going into a school that is facing some serious problems, how can you turn that around quickly? So this program is designed to provide support to those principals and to the school leadership team. And it goes on for 1 to 3 years. It depends on how quickly we can get this school out of the status. And we ground everything in our standards. And so we have adopted the professional standards for educational leaders, and we've developed a rubric to identify those highly effective, developing, and ineffective practices. And we also use the 4 domains of rapid school improvement developed by the Mid-Atlantic Comprehensive Center at West Ed, their Center for School Turnaround. And I keep coming back to these leadership coaches because they are critical. It's one thing to invite a school leader out to a professional learning experience and they kind of come and they get it and they go back and it kind of stays on the shelf. It may be implemented a little bit. But that leadership coach has been all the difference in ensuring that what we're working with our school principals on is actually being implemented on the ground level. So it is our bridge between the policies that we're implementing and the regulations that we're enacting, all of the federal funding that we're using to ensure that this is actually happening in the building. And then with our evaluator training, this is very important because we're revising our evaluation system. We don't want the evaluation system to be this process to evaluate you out of the field. We really wanted to focus on enhancing your professional practice and focusing on improving student outcomes. And so we have kicked this off and we started earlier this year, just going around. We plan to train a little over 1,000 of our principals. All principals will be required to go through our evaluator training, and then we will be doing follow-up in schools to ensure that what we've trained on is actually happening. And none of this would have been possible without the Title II dollars. And so I know that, you know, we're thankful that the Title II dollars, they are still here and that they remained at the same level of funding. But there's really a need to even increase this funding because the principal's job is so important. And if we're talking about preparing our students and making sure that they're ready to achieve in the world, we have to make sure that we have principals and teachers engaging in ongoing professional learning experiences. So we really want to make sure that Title II funds are around to stay and that they are increased if possible. So that was just my quick overview of the principals, especially in Maryland, and some of the initiatives that we're using federal dollars for. I'm always happy to explain more, to provide additional information. But what you're about to have the opportunity to hear from is our panel of experts who are practitioners in the field who have lived this life of being a principal. So I would like to call all of our panelists to the stage, to their seats. And I would like to introduce our session moderator, Mr. Scott Palmer. So Mr. Palmer is the managing partner and co-founder of the Education Council. In this role, he provides policy, legal, strategic planning, and advocacy services to educational leaders across the country. We work with this council in Maryland, and they provide great support to us. So let's all welcome Mr. Palmer and the panelists.
How's that? Much better. I can hear it myself. Thank you. Good afternoon. Or maybe, let's see. Yes, good afternoon. Let me start by thanking Tara. I thought that was a wonderful job and overview from the evidence to the particularities of the experience in Maryland, and thank you for your leadership. It's been a privilege for our team to get to work with you and the team. As was said earlier, we have a fantastic panel of leaders and experts not only at their school level, but at the local, state, and national level, who I'll introduce in a moment. Let me start, though, by thanking NAESP, NASSP, AFSA, AFSA. I just like spelling it out because it's rare, even in Washington, that you get to say that many acronyms at once, for hosting this and letting me be even a small part of National Principals Month on such an important topic and issue. I think as Tiara laid out very well, we know a lot from evidence and experience about the vital role of principals and other school leaders in terms of getting the opportunity, the systems, the outcomes that we need. You heard about the evidence in terms of principals being the factor, in-school factor second only to teacher quality in terms of direct effect on student outcomes, the evidence of the close relationship between principal quality and leadership and the attraction and retention of the highest talent in the teaching force. Other studies have shown that, I think Wong said, and this is hard to prove a negative, that they have virtually no instance they found of a low-performing school turning around without a highly effective principal. Makes sense, but nice to see and get that validation. And as Tiara said, there's been a really increasing focus on issues of principal leadership in the policy level. It's still catching up in a lot of ways, and I think that's important, but including at the federal level, including things like the Every Student Succeeds Act and ESSA and Title II, which again made much more express the important allowable use and focus on principal leadership and has retained that important investment that you heard a lot of great things about the uses. As another example, folks may be familiar with the 3% set aside in ESSA that's optional for states. It's interesting to see at least just by self-reporting, called for a majority of states, or close to a majority, are using those funds, and my guess is it's actually a much higher percentage of that for the kinds of things that Tiara identified. And we're now seeing bipartisan support in new marker legislation and other things around trying to continue that focus in HEA reauthorization. So again, this is really encouraging, but I hope that the panel and discussion today can help really illustrate what that really looks like, what it means, why it's important, because we have that chance to dig deeper with this great group of folks. You have bios for everyone in your materials. I'm going to give you the top line, but then if you want to read more, please look there. They've won a lot of awards and honors, and they'll also be available after the discussion. We're sitting in one order, but I'm going to go in a different order just to highlight that we also have the great benefit of leaders from all levels of the education system. Not that that's a monolithic issue, but I think it's good to see that diversity here as well. So Eric, I'm going to start with you. Eric Cardwell is the principal of Besser Elementary School in Alpena, Michigan. He has kids that are my kids' age, so I appreciate that. He is also the president of NAESP. Laura Mastrogiovanni, which I love, is the principal of MS 137 America School of Heroes in Ozone Park, New York. Let me ask all of you permission to call you by your first names, because even though I'd love to do it all day, we don't have time for me to keep saying Mastrogiovanni, so that'd be great. And then finally, Dr. Christine Handy, who's the principal at Gaithersburg High School and the president of NASSP. I'll also note a principal in the great district where I was educated in the public schools, and I think that worked out okay for them. We can talk about it afterwards. So thank you all for being here, and thank you so much for your service to the kids you work with and to your states and our nation. I really appreciate it immensely. So let's get into it. And let me start sort of at the highest level, and then we'll work our way down. And again, we're going to talk a little up here, and then we're going to open it up to questions and comments. So please keep track of those, and we'll leave ample time. Eric, again, I'll start working up the line, because I think you'll all want to weigh in on this. But we heard about the critical role of the principal, the role of instructional leader. Tiara put up a really impressive but scary list of the responsibilities of a highly effective principal, in case any of us think our jobs are hard, right? You've got that list to look at. But help us unpack that for a little bit. What does that really look like? What does it take? What does it mean to be an effective principal? Why is it important to the outcomes that we want for kids?
Can you guys hear me? Do I need a mic? Yeah, it's not working either.
I think it came on without a light, so let's see if it's on now.
Okay. Well, you know, Tiara, when you put all those pieces, those bullet points about what principals do on a daily basis, what I pictured was the quintessential dowel with the plate spinning and principals running in between those to keep it afloat. But you know, in regard to the question about that Scott posed was, you know, effective schools really, the bottom line is it's on the relationships we have with our stakeholders. Parents are obviously our students, but when we talk about instructional leadership, our staff needs to trust us on this journey. And when we truly effective leaders, you have district initiatives that are in place, you have school initiatives that are in place, and our job is to really weave those into one. Now, effective schools also, by leveraging those relationships, there's open communication with the stakeholders. So it's not just top down, bottom up. It's really a mixture of what the folks within the school family, extended school family, feel is important, even the students, as a matter of fact. But with that, takes, you know, the one comment I've heard time and again has been there's not enough time, and time is the most critical issue that we have. The most critical resource. I think as an instructional leader, it's important to give our teachers adequate time to train, implement, and reflect. One of the things that has been in my 19 years as a building principal, and maybe my colleagues up here would concur, is that sometimes as an institution, we go to that shiny thing, that next shiny thing, without implementing fully previous initiatives. So I think effective schools scale that back. They identify what are our core targets, and once we achieve those, we'll layer on another piece. One of the things, getting back to Tiara's piece, Education Week did an outstanding job 2 years ago. It was the first real major study in looking at the work week of a principal. And on average, principals are working 59 hours per week, just actually closer to 60 if you round. But with that is an opportunity because, as Tiara mentioned, leveraging the power of our staff, our teacher leaders, parents, brings a more wholesome, all-around, authentic approach to leadership, and it really does turn into a community school if done appropriately.
Laura, can I ask you just to build on that and maybe even focus in on this importance of collaboration and some of the other things that I think Eric was getting at?
So absolutely. So Eric made some very important points, and if I can just take the one word, time, and elaborate a little bit on that. It's not even the time that we give the teachers, but time that we give ourselves to work with the staff, work with the parents. So time to embed for ourselves to be part of that practice. When you're in effective leadership, and we have many years in as principals right at this panel, I have 13 years in as a principal and of course many years as an administrator in the assistant principal role. But if we are not working together collaboratively with our stakeholders in the school community, we do not get the job done effectively. Demanding and dictating does not get the job done. You have to be part of that distributive leadership to build, showcase, model. Every word that you can use, every synonym you can find to associate modeling and best practices need to be put into place. But you are the leader. You need to be part of it. So sitting behind in a closed door does not work. Sitting at your desk does not work. Being part of the practice is what works, and that's where the time comes in. So your operational demands on the PowerPoint of all what Tiara mentioned happen after the school day, and that is where all the support is needed beyond the school day as well. So I'm sure that Dr. Hanty or Christine can add to that as well.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so most importantly, principals, let's see here. Principals we're responsible for the day-to-day operations of the school and then instructional leadership. And the instructional leadership is where we have to really devote a lot of time because that's what's going to move students forward, right? And so that is, for a high school principal, we're talking 60 to 70 hours a week because not only do we have all those things during the day, lots of activities for high school principals in the evening. And so we have to, we listed the things like being in classrooms, observing and evaluating teachers, engaging with teachers in lesson planning, connecting teachers and content coaches with appropriate professional learning opportunities. So our job is so encompassing.
Let's talk about that teaching connection more, right? Because I think, that seems to get at the heart of the instructional leadership piece. If your job is to create an environment where every teacher is continuously improving individually and collectively all the time, what does that take? How do you spend, what does a day look like when you're really trying to lead that kind of school?
Well, certainly we have to, it's important for administrators and our teacher leaders to get in classrooms. So it doesn't all fall on the principal because we do have assistant principals and we also have teacher leaders. So it's important that we're there to connect and support our teachers. It is really important that we get in there, we're using data, we're making data-driven decisions. So we're reviewing the data more than ever before so that we can see where kids are, where the gaps are, And we're using that data. So in Montgomery County Public Schools, we have data right at our fingertips. We use a program called Performance Matters, which is pretty incredible. So we have more than enough data at our fingertips every day. And so we're encouraging, we have to do a lot of professional development so that we can help our teachers to be able to use that data to make instructional decisions.
And please jump in, others, but go ahead, Laura.
So to build on what Christine just said, part of the instructional day, the core of your instructional day is getting into the classroom. But then what do you do with that? So you have a cycle of reflective feedback, meeting with the teachers immediately, not waiting, but getting into having that reflective conversation where you're meeting with the teacher, you're having an instructional conversation, maybe based on a particular area or a domain. Maybe it's questioning, maybe it's planning, whatever you noticed or whatever they reflected on, so that they can build their own practice. But part of also that instructional day is attending common planning, working with your common planning teams, whether it's an ELA team, a math team. You as an instructional leader have no specific domain. You need to know everything. So whether you're working with the performing arts, the physical education department, whether you're working with math, science, social studies, ELA, you are part of all of that, and you are literacy at the top. So as an instructor, literacy is paramount, and then you're doing all of the content areas as well as the ancillary areas. So that is part of your daily instructional core in order to make movement in your building, and I'm sure that Eric could add on to that.
Well, one of the things that I work hard on is obviously the relationship piece with my staff, because we meet at the start of the school year. We spend a couple of days where they do a self-reflective piece and where they believe they are, and we discuss it together. Again, building that capacity, when I do go in to do the evaluations, it's about a conversation. And that's truly what I want my teachers to take away. This is an opportunity for them, through self-reflection as well as observation, to help improve their own professional toolkit. And so I found that real powerful. Now, I don't know how my colleagues feel. One of the struggles that I have is that, at least in my state of Michigan, every teacher has to be evaluated every single year. And in 2016-17, I actually logged how much time that took, and it was 296 hours for a year. Now, if I could restructure that for my colleagues in our state, it would be, we know these teachers that are the top of their professional career. They don't have to be evaluated every single year. What I want to do is spend additional time with some of our beginning teachers, or those teachers that need a little bit extra assistance. It goes back to what we talked about before with that time piece. We have a finite amount of time. It's how we divvy up that time. But I do find that the observation, being in the classrooms, offering feedback, to be a very, very powerful tool. And it's the discussion that
So,
occurs.
I hear from each of you this real team orientation, right? The schools, but you seem to be, and necessarily so, the quarterback and the coach and seemingly the equipment manager. It's also very hard, right?
Sometimes water boy.
Water, exactly.
Absolutely.
But I hear a prioritization too, right, in terms of how you're spending your time in that instructional leadership role, and that makes sense. Laura, you wanted to say something?
But to add on to that, it's not only I.
Right.
So to build on that,
Exactly where I wanna go.
we
Good.
have to have that distributive leadership.
Good.
And part of building on that is being able to, get in there and recognize who is able to step and who is willingly, and who we can motivate to really take and build capacity in your school community, in the teaching and learning in the teaching and learning community. With that, just every state has different evaluation processes. The highly effective teacher that Eric has mentioned, we do an intervisitation process. So they may have a certain amount of informal observations or evaluations. However, they open up their classrooms. So you can have a multitude of teachers opening up their classrooms, which now become model classrooms. In that, you have collaboration, intervisitation, everybody walking in, out, shared learning, shared lesson planning. That is discussed through discussion, conversation, through common planning. All of this gets put in place through systems, through the leadership. It does come back to the leadership. However, distributive leadership of model teachers, coaches, peer coaches.
Can I push on that for just a minute and unpack that a little bit? Because I think this is really a helpful clarification. One is just the closeness between the evaluation side and the coaching side, which some of you have talked about is critically important. So even without the evaluation, I imagine, though you'd prioritize, the capacity is really central. In a lot of policy, we use the term principals and other school leaders, quote unquote. I'm curious, what's the optimal team that is around you in order to do everything you're describing? What role do principal supervisors play? Tiara, you pointed to principal coaches, or what does your team in distributed leadership or teacher leadership look like? Can you paint a little picture for us? I don't know, if Christine, if you have thoughts on that.
Right. So for me, certainly I have a coach. Our supervisors of administrators are there and the support for us, and also observe and look at the data and coach the principal.
Really?
But then we also, in the school, we have our department chairs. They are your department leaders. We also have content coaches that come from central office that are supporting those department chairs. And then you have your assistant principals. So there's different layers there, but there's support coming from, so you have central office and school-based leadership all working together for a common goal.
Very good. Eric, I'm sorry, did you want to say something of this? You're good?
I was just going to say that, part of my school, of our school leadership team, we have our school psychologist that participates in those discussions, our Title I teacher, a parent. So there's that distributive leadership. But, underlining, Tiara pointed it out, the importance of those Title IIA monies for those professional coaches is absolutely critical. And I think I heard her say explicitly that it would be nice to have more, because you really do see the power of these coaches working with your staff. And you see, and one of the items that I saw, I recently did a 5,000-mile road tour of 7 states, and what I saw while I was out on the road was a real discrepancy as far as the availability of resources from school buildings having 2 coaches in building to a school district perhaps not having one, or maybe having 2 for 4,000 students.
Yeah, so the capacity challenges are really clear. I want to get to the policy side, but before I do, a couple more just on the educational side, wearing your school hat. So staying on the teacher piece, we heard the data about the importance of the role of the principal in retaining great talent. We know that in certain regions, in certain areas, we do have teacher shortages. I was just with the state of Virginia. I was talking a lot about that the other day. I think there's an important effort to bring more diversity into the profession. What's the role of the principal? Can you unpack that for us? Why does a great principal lead to retention of great talent? Why is that so important? There was an article today around DC that talked about the surprisingly high loss rate of teachers. So can we just talk about that for a minute?
I certainly can. I have a very large school. I have a minimum of 150 teachers on my staff for a middle school. We have over 2,000 students. For a middle school, we're an exception. We're not the norm. However, you have to have retention. We have very little turnover, very little. Our turnover goes to other professions because they've moved out of state and they couldn't get another reciprocal license. However, the fact is that with the collaboration of universities, we bring in student teachers. We get them from the beginning. We train with the student teachers. We have other pathways. We use multiple pathways to bring our teachers in. So and I don't want to throw out names that you may not be familiar with, but maybe different pathways to teaching besides the regular teaching degrees in which we bring them in, we train, the city brings them in, trains, but we embrace different pathways, but we also support, because we know that that is not the only education that they need in order to be successful in a classroom. We know this for a fact. You need to have the classroom management, the instruction. So although we embrace them, we also need to support them because they may not succeed else in other school buildings. In ours, they're succeeding because we're supporting them, but we support them with veteran teachers. We support them with coaches. How do we do this? Well, we really, really do try to woo in those Title II funds. And we really try to bring in the other pathways by pushing, getting those fundings into our building or supporting the programs that are out there. So I think that one of the major points is really starting with your universities and making some partnerships with those colleges and universities that have educational programs.
I'd love it if Eric and Christine would speak to this a little bit, because Christine, we were talking before the meeting, and you were talking about the challenges with teacher prep and how, in addition to the list here that you had up there, very often you're responsible for the follow-on teacher preparation and then the development, right, and how critical that is to success. Can you talk to that role a little bit as well?
Yeah, so what we were discussing was our university preparation programs and how we need to support them and inform them of what we need in our schools today. Where we're seeing is what we're having to do at the school level is we're having to close the gap and really do it at the school level, what we need our teachers to be able to know and be able to do. One of the areas that we're seeing a huge shortage of teachers is in the area of STEM. We are trying to increase the rigor in our schools. We're trying to attract more of our students to STEM careers, STEM-related careers, and we are not able to find the teachers. As we increase the rigor with our science technology standards, all students in high school, we're looking at all students have to take physics, but where are the physics teachers? We're increasing computer science and networking, those kind of offerings. Where are the computer science teachers? If you're a computer scientist, you can make a whole lot more money than working in a school. So how do we make schools an attractive place for people who are in STEM careers? So that is something that we really have to address. Our policymakers need to look, how do we make it more attractive as we want to increase that area of the workforce?
Thank you. Eric?
So on the tour that I went on, I heard from across 7 states, special ed continues to be a challenge for filling CTE positions. Even jobs that used to be able to be filled with numerous applicants, sometimes elementary education, the pool is very thin, and I'm here to say the canary in the coal mine, it's going to hit crisis, and in some cases we are already there. And speaking to Christine's point about the sciences, I recently spoke with a third-year science teacher, secondary science teacher in Michigan, Fowlerville, Michigan, Kyle Hutchinson, and he waits tables or busses tables at a restaurant, and he actually figured out that he earned more money bussing tables, and it's not a 5-star restaurant, than he gets as an hourly wage as a teacher. So that's not the prep time before or after school. So I think from a societal point of view, we really have to look at is the pay adequate for these people? It's $150,000 at Michigan State to get your teaching degree with room and board, and you're going to start at $33,000. And I think we're seeing kids pull out of the profession, unfortunately. And it breaks my heart as a third-generation educator.
So we're putting a lot of issues on the table. Let me ask one more practice issue, and then we'll transfer to policy a little bit, then we'll open it up for some conversation and questions. Another big issue that's, I think, on front of mind right now and emanates in part from the federal law is hopefully improved efforts around evidence-based actions to turn around our low-performing schools. And as we said earlier, evidence and common sense would tell us that the role of the principal is critical there. It might be different in some degree than in other school environments or goals. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit to what that looks like. You may have had that experience directly or indirectly. Why is it so important to turn around, particularly because in most states, the lowest performing schools under ESSA are going to be identified this year. Can we just spend a minute on that role as well? Not that you need another role, mind you, but
So
please.
I can actually talk.
Thank you, Laura.
I can actually talk a little bit to that. So we have a program in our city which is called the Learning Partners Program. And we actually triad or quad with other schools that We can show best practices. Even if you're the whole school, you can pick up a best practice from the other schools. And in this case, if it's a turnaround school, a renewal school, they can see leadership style. They can see curriculum and instruction. They can see as simple as how do we get that curriculum map and resources going in order to have the students achieve and close those gaps, especially for the diverse learner. It's a monumental program. It's effective. It works. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's only a certain amount of schools, and there's a lot more schools that could use and benefit. Also, one of the major things in the renewal schools is to have the co-teaching programs. Not that it's all special ed. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about having teachers, co-teaching teachers in the general ed classroom to support the gap that are in those classes, those students. The engagement is during the class day. A lot of these schools are in areas, and this is nationwide, are in areas that don't support the student when they go home. Meaning the families are not supporting the student when they get home academically, socially. So everything has to be done in the school building. We all know what that is. We know what the hats we wear. We wear the social emotional learning hat. We wear the mental wellness hat. We have all of these programs in place. They need to be compounded, supported, doubled, tripled, whatever it takes in those school buildings during the school day. This will support those students. This will support the achievement and the progress of those students,
Chris?
Yeah, so
as well as teachers.
in Maryland, and when we want to talk about why Title II funds are so critical and so important, schools that have been identified as needing additional support are part of the Leading for School Improvement Institute. And so we know that we have to support the leadership. The leadership of the school is critical. And so the Leading for School Improvement Institute does just that, and we're able to do that with Title II funding.
Great, and I'll connect this back to Tiara's point. That's part of the system there. So let's get then to Title II and ESSA and these important policies and investments. So I know you've spoken to it a little bit, but let's address it head on for a moment. Does it matter? Why does it matter? How much? Okay, I could say it clearly matters. How does it matter? Why does it matter? Can you just talk a little bit about the role and the importance of those funds and the other focus on issues of teacher and leader quality? Who would like to start?
It's your turn.
Wow, how much time do we have? Sincerely, the Title II funds are absolutely critical, as we've already outlined from the teaching standpoint with our coaches to the potential use of the mentoring funds through Title II for principal professional development. One of the items that we talk about in our membership, 56% of our members have 0 to 5 years of experience. And what that is telling me is that people get in, they might get overwhelmed, and then they get out, either back into teaching or into another job endeavor. And what we need to do a better job with is providing that mentorship, that collaboration, that time for those folks to ask the questions that they have and not just turn the keys over to them and into their school buildings. In regard to also the importance of Title II, you know, some districts, I visited a district in Wisconsin, La Crosse, Wisconsin, and they use a portion of their Title II funds to lower class sizes for their lower elementary, where they shoot for 16 kids in a kindergarten classroom, and that does make a difference instructionally for our kids. So the Title II funds are absolutely critical. If Title II was removed, it would have a catastrophic effect on our schools across the United States. It provides the lifeblood for the PD that drives the instruction in the classroom.
So,
Thank you. Laura?
well, if I could add to Eric, I mean, it's a nationwide funding from the federal government. It's a nationwide conversation, and there are nationwide issues. And we've laid them out this entire panel has laid them out, and Tiara has hit upon all the points of the leadership development, teacher development, the professional development across the boards, the pathways that we need, and this will never go away. I mean, if there's one thing that we'll always have a constant of is the need to improve our education.
Christine, anything you want to add?
No, all I would just reiterate is that leadership matters, and that is so important that we invest in the leadership of our schools, invest in our principals and school leaders, because if we want to make our schools better, we must invest in education.
Great. So I'm sorry I didn't give you a closer heads up. I should have maybe given you a 2-minute warning, but I think this is a good place and time to open it up for questions and comments. I have a couple of others, but I want to make sure that we maximize time for discussion if folks are interested. I think we've got some mics traveling around the room, so let's take a minute. I'm not great at wait time, but let's take a minute, look at your notes, gather your thoughts, and are there particular questions either on the practice side or the policy side that it would be good to get deeper into? I think they already put a lot on the table. So questions, comments? I know we also have some coming in electronically too. I don't know how to find them, but I understand that they're coming in. So Danny's got it. Excellent. Okay. And you don't mind introducing yourself as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, my name's Stephen Casio. I'm with the Learning Policy Institute. I appreciated all the remarks of the panel, but especially the time. I was wondering as a principal if you could talk about trying to structure the school day, either to get all your math teachers to have the same planning period or to have a team that's aligned that has the same students to be able to sort of target them and some of the challenges that go along with that.
Great, thank you.
So I would say at the high school level, that is a bigger challenge, especially at a large high school. Gaithersburg High School has almost 2,500 students and over 180 teachers. So it is difficult to try to give them all common planning time, so we have to prioritize. And so we will look at using our data, make decisions, and also looking at the accountability measures across the state. Which areas do we really need those teachers to have common planning time so that they can meet in PLCs, professional learning communities? So we will prioritize, like we might say, Algebra 1, biology. We want to make sure that those teachers have common planning time. So for us, it's just a matter of prioritizing.
So if I can speak to that, it took us time. However, we have it a well-oiled machine. And our programming is one of the things that is the hub of our school, and we are a model school for that reason, and collaborative team teachers. We have 19 teams. They all meet by grade and subject area, and they meet twice a week. We have what we call a split SBO, so they meet twice a week mandated in their teams, and then the other 3 periods a week for the 5 periods. 1 period is self-directed professional development, which I give them time to look at professional information, or it's all self-directed. And the other 2 are what we call in New York our Circular 6 under their union. So they have a professional assignment 2, 1 self-directed, and the other 2 are mandated common planning for their grade and content area. And then we have after school on Monday, 80 minutes in which we can do it lateral or horizontal and mix it up. So there's plenty of time to ICTs to meet if they have to. So to me, programming is essential. It is the core of your school community. And if you can make that work, you can make everything work. So in a high school, it's a little different. So in a middle school, it's more of a homogeneous situation for the subject areas.
So in addition to being instructional experts and leaders and data and relational, there's an important design component to how you structure the school, and again, this critical resource of time and capacity.
You need to be systems thinking.
Yeah, and we're doing a lot of work at council around what it would take to really think of schools and the entire education system as learning systems. You want this kind of time for the individual coaching, the collective capacity for everyone. but the challenges are great. It's really helpful to hear you unpack them. Maybe if Congress could find a way to stop time, that would be really helpful. We can think about that. Thank you to
Well, give
LPI
us
for your great work
programmers.
in this area as well. Really appreciate you saw some of the evidence from your shop earlier, so thanks for the question. Other questions or comments? We're taking back the mic. No more for you. Other questions or comments? Good, right over here. Yes, teacher voice. They may want it for for posterity and video. So I'm delaying because they're running the mic over to you while I'm talking like this. It's all there. You go. Perfect. Thanks for your patience.
I hate these things.
I know.
I'm a physics teacher, so yes, we're rare.
You're hired.
This is so exciting.
get a
It's
job
like
anywhere.
Interview panel. I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
But we're on the Hill, so we have some Einstein Fellows on the Hill that are teachers that have come to the Capitol Hill to see how Congress is doing the teaching thing. But I'm a career changer, so I was an engineer before I was a teacher, and I was wondering, I've watched some of my peers crash and burn, and in fact, a majority of the career changers crash and burn, which are a good source of STEM teachers for you, but they can't do it with kids. And so they have this wonderful idealism that comes with it, and then they say, oh, I had an agenda and they didn't follow it. Well, 160 teenagers don't follow an agenda correctly. So, but it seems like we're missing a critical piece of leadership there for folks that come in to just learn how to deal with just, I know that sounds a little corny, but the student side, so that they can actually manage what they know and they love and they really want to contribute, but they do that crash and burn dive. So thoughts?
Yeah, great question, and yet another role, right, for the principals, because they're
'cause I
coming
thought
to
they
you.
needed another one,
Great
'cause,
resource.
you know,
So
you're
does
listening.
anyone have experience or want to speak to that? I don't know if Christine, is that something at the high school level in particular, not to?
So certainly, you brought up such a good point. When we have our career changers, we talk about it's not necessarily always a recruitment problem, it's a retention problem. So we have to provide them, we know that we have to provide them with more support. We're talking about as relates to pedagogy, just how to teach. They know the content, but how to teach the content, because that student engagement is critical, and what makes a difference in classroom management is the ability to engage the students in the teaching and learning process. And sometimes we find that teachers want to teach the way they were taught many years ago, and that's not how kids learn today. So the pedagogy, we also will do a lot of mentoring and peer observations and things like that. So the key is the support, the professional development, you know, and those career changers having an open mind and be willing to learn.
Other thoughts on this?
Well, we have a fellow program in New York, Fellows Program. That's one of the many pathways, and we're very, like I said before, we're very fellow-friendly. I also am a career change from many years ago. I spent 18 years in importing furniture from Italy. And I went into teaching, fell in love with education, and moved up. So I have a passion for people who have a passion for education. If you have it, we'll make it work.
So they're competing for you. You hear this, right? Eric, do you want to make a play, or you? Okay.
How do you like the Great Lakes?
There you go. Excellent. Now it's getting really
We'll take
direct.
you to New York.
And also Hill experience. It's the full package. Other questions or comments?
I'm going to start singing New York, New York.
Oh,
Yes,
hi,
sir.
yeah.
Thank
Pete
you.
Mills with Senator Chris Murphy's office. I just wanted you guys to hear more about when it comes to supporting new and struggling teachers. Obviously, through the evaluation process, you have a lot of interaction with those teachers. And I know, Eric, you talked about trying to be able to prioritize your time towards those teachers and not being able to all the time. So I was wondering if you could talk more about what you find is most effective in the time you do have working with those teachers to move them from not just being new or struggling teachers, being those veteran and more effective teachers. It's like, what are strategies you tend to use that are most effective in supporting those teachers?
Great question.
Giving them time.
Yeah.
Giving them time with the people. You know, in my role, connecting them with the resources that are necessary. Sometimes that's just me bouncing ideas, but then it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning about the relationships, that we're all working in the same direction. We want them to improve. in providing that, but that takes time. And you know, and as far as the teachers that I've worked with, they've been so fantastic about wanting to stay after school because they want to improve their skill, their craft. So I found that to be helpful as well. I don't know if you guys have.
Well, if I could add to what you just said, Eric, that's perfect, as well as when there is a particular focus, it doesn't have to be content related, but say there's a skill that they need or a strategy they need in the classroom, especially with the new teachers. It's more about the strategies in the classroom and the management of how to work with certain students or a classroom environment. Intervisitation is crucial. Crucial. So if you can open up your school building and have that shared learning experience, that is what you need in your building. So effective leadership, and that's what it's all about, really training principals to have effective leadership, that they can have a collaborative building that opens up and shares. Having new teachers going into rooms that they need those strategies for, doesn't matter content, just go see. If you're a social studies teacher and you need to see about classroom management and this teacher is really your style, go into that room because everyone is different.
Release time is critical.
Absolutely. Free them up. Give them a day. Free them.
I want to dig deeper on this, but Christine, you have some thoughts too?
Yes, I just wanted to add, in Montgomery County, we have a flagship program called our consultant teachers. So we have expert teachers across the county who are assigned a caseload. All new teachers are in the consultant teacher program. And so those teachers go in more frequently than an administrator has the time to do and provide them with coaching. And they do not do the final evaluations. And their information does not come to the principal for the final evaluation. So they really serve as coaches of teachers, and I think that is really a program that we're very proud of.
You know, I was speaking to a principal in Montgomery County, this is now a few years ago, and we were talking about the instructional leaders that they had, and there were budget issues, and I said, how important are these? And she said, I would fire myself before I would fire, right? Like, and you see how important the role of the principal is. So I think one thing that this all brings to me, the last couple of questions, is the importance of us to understanding that we are rightly at this moment trying to dramatically change the nature of the teaching enterprise, the school enterprise, based on the science of learning and development, based on what we know about what's effective teaching, right? The idea that you might have more time for teachers to get individual coaching and collaborate, that might mean less time even in the classroom, that might lead to greater effectiveness and outcomes, right? There's a counterintuitiveness that, again, creates further responsibilities on the principal leader. Am I understanding it correctly, or if I'm misrepresenting?
Well, I just want to say that the successes that we experience as a panel or in our schools didn't come without a price, and the funding came from the Title II. And one of the things that to have an effective leadership or to be recognized as a model school and have effective leadership came through my support, through having a mentor, a coach, a consultant. I had all three at one point in my 13 years. So in the beginning, we had a mentor, then I had a coach, then I had a consultant, then I went back to a different type of coaching. Even last year, I was part of an executive coaching program in which I became an executive coach, but also had a coach, which also enhanced my own practices. So it's a constant upping. I was part of the Con Fellow program through Columbia, which also rejuvenated my leadership skills in my 7th year as a principal. So there are pivotal points in which where you felt maybe 0 to 5 that you were weaning and losing it, that I was rejuvenated and re-inspired as a leader to move on and keep going and pick up and inspire the school community. So there are points in which you need support. It's not always the first year. It could be you need it in the 5th, 7th, 10th year in order to keep going. But this can't be done without those fundings and without a focus on what is needed for effective leadership.
Very good. Any other questions or comments from you? Yes, sir.
This is Locke Hortang. I'm with Senator Stabenow's office. So my question to all three of you on we know that SMA changes around professional development. It has to be job embedded, continuous, et cetera. I guess my question would be, what does good professional development look like?
Great question. Who would like to start?
Well, first of all, it's not a one-time, one-stop shop. It has to be ongoing and continuous. That would be probably my primary thing I would say. And it has to be practical and hands-on and engaging. So things that you can go back to your school and directly apply into the job that you're doing each and every day.
I would say tailored. It has to be tailored to the individual because, we're at different points in our career and have different needs.
I could only add to, I wrote the word individual, and absolutely, it needs to be, and I'll use your word, Eric, tailored to the leadership that is in place, and not only for the person, but for the school. So, it might be for the district or for the school, because every district and school is different, and I'm sure that it's nationwide. It's not going to be any different in New York City or New York than it is in Michigan or Maryland.
And the good news is I can see these concepts in the language in my mind from Title II and obviously wide allowable uses, but the idea, does it give the leeway and the leverage, right, for folks on the ground, and that's really affirming. Thank you for the question. I thought I saw another hand as well. Did you have a question or comment?
I had a comment.
Good.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Orsini Fox, an assistant principal in Middle School 137.
I think we've heard of that school.
Yes.
Yes, good.
Laura Mastrogiovanni is my principal. We've worked together many years. This is my 24th year in the school system, and I have to say, when this great physics teacher spoke about the teacher or teachers that leaving because they can't handle the students, I don't think it's the students. I think the classroom management, I don't like to use the word neglect, but because principals have so many hats to wear, many times, I don't think it may be deliberate, that teacher goes unnoticed. That teacher goes unnoticed. That teacher went 5 years in that school and went unnoticed, rather than embracing and inspiring those teachers to make them want to stay and sit down with those teachers. Then they realize there's many times when you build, I'm all about the scheduling. I think it all starts from planning, using your budget that you're going to get the most from. And budgeting your building and organizing those teacher teams is key. So if a teacher has a team, responding to your question, a team of science, social studies, ELA, and math, they can follow that particular class if they're having the trouble with the students, classroom management. They could follow that class into another teacher and have a buddy system. They need that buddy system. But the thing is, if a principal doesn't get that opportunity to self-reflect and use the affective skills, it's not just everything is about academics. You need to self-reflect as a leader. And if they don't self-reflect and see what's going on in their building, sometimes a bird's eye view isn't enough. You need to be in it. That's the only way that's going to make change, and it's a sin. And I really feel it's a sin that teachers have to leave and have to have that frustrated. And not to pat my school on the back, but when we talk to other teachers and part of the LPP, the Learning Partners Program, and they sit and they listen and they're like, "Oh, can I come here?" It's because then their voice is not heard, and a teacher's voice needs to be heard. And we all know we like to give that personal feedback to our students, when they're writing an essay. But everyone does like to hear "good job."
Right.
Everyone likes to get that instant gratification of, "good job, you did a great job. I love what you're doing today." We all like to hear it, and I think the only way to get that change is, yes, training those principals, but not as machines.
Yeah, thank you.
They have to have that feeling.
And I hear the systems piece in there, and I hear the capacity and time piece, all very helpful. And Laura will be happy to know, very consistent. So the good news is we've got the leadership team on the same page. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm quite interested in this whole concept of distributed leadership, which you brought up, Laura. And the assistant principal is on your team. And the research clearly tells us that they are the most neglected part of the food chain.
That's true.
I know that. So what is it that you're doing to nurture, grow your assistant principals?
Okay, so we actually have a wonderful leadership pathway. My teachers have become assistant principals, and what we call people who have gone downtown, worked at Tweed, et cetera. I've nurtured them and moved them out. My assistant principals have predominantly stuck with me, and I need to move them out eventually because I will retire eventually, and then they're going to be. But the leadership skills that they built, I am very much on hands, and it's exhausting work, and I'm sure that Eric and Christine could attest to this because it is exhausting. So when you say 60 hours, I would probably venture to say it's more than that. Average.
Yeah, Eric said it, now don't blame me.
Yes. It is a constant communication. It's communication. The very first year I became a principal, I did the Hunter College Emotional Intelligence. We brought everyone in. We spent the next 7 years bringing in people in emotional intelligence. So I did all of we worked with all of the APs. They all had the individual coaching, and we built upon that. Then we spread it out to the teachers, and then we had to stop for budgetary reasons, but we had about 29, and then 29 teachers, all my APs, all the out-of-classroom teachers, staff who worked with the school building. But the fact is we started at that level because I went from assistant principal to principal working with my colleagues. And now being a supervisor of my colleagues, I wanted to still embrace the job, but as a supervisor, still know that I was the supervisor, but I was still your colleague. So with that, emotional intelligence and social emotional learning needed to be embedded in our lives. And we started many, many years ago, and that was going back to 2005. And we continued that practice. So it is a constant communication. There were times that I think you're in my head and you know what I want, and I don't communicate. But for the most part, it's all the work of communication and is so key. But again, I go back to I had a consultant, I had a mentor, I had a coach who told me, a third party from outside, who said or regrounded you to say, listen, you need to look at it this way and be a part of this. So I think, and that came from funding.
Great question. And think about the implications for principal prep and for principal development to do all of this. Any other thoughts on that, or should I, Christine, did you have something you want to say about that?
Yes. In Montgomery County, we have a leadership development program for our assistant principals. So starting with their first year, they go through a program, AP1, we call it AP1. Then their second year, they go through AP2. And then those who aspire to be administrators are able to apply to, those who aspire to be principals can apply to be a principal intern. So we have a leadership development program outlined with the curriculum and everything that we utilize. And then I also think it's just important, I see myself as the principal, as the head coach, and these are like my team captains. Yeah. And so it's important that I focus on their development. So I work directly with them to help them. And I think it's important, I always say, in order to serve them well, you have to know them well. So it's important to know their strengths and challenges and to support them in those areas that they need additional help.
Very helpful. I think we have time for maybe one more question or comment from the floor, and then we'll wrap it up. Yes, ma'am. The mic is coming right around. My bad job that I have to delay you. There you go. Now you've got it. Thanks.
Thanks. My name is Heather. I work for Congressman Connor Lamb. Thanks for being here and for the work that you do. I just wanted to hear a little bit about the ways that you incorporate feedback from individual teachers and use that to either improve or change some of the ways that you implement Title II dollars and shape your professional development programs at your schools and districts.
Great question.
That's a good question. So we start off every year, actually in June, doing an assessment for what we want for the next year. So we put out a survey for the teachers, actually what is it that you would like. We also answer a district survey, and we answer a citywide So the city takes over, the district, so there are multiple levels of the use of the funding sources in order to meet the professional development needs. So we're supported as a school and we're supported as a district by our entire district, New York City, for professional development on the areas that we take through a survey.
And much like she said, we do perception surveys with our staff, gaining information, but they also serve at the district level as far as offering guidance suggestions for initiatives that they see worthwhile as well. So it's collaborative.
And Eric, you talked about the personalization of PD being so important earlier, much like we need to personalize more for kids also. Is that part of the process that makes the PD most effective, and how does that fit in?
Are you talking about for us as
No, for the
administrators?
teachers in terms of their voice and feedback on PD and what's most effective, if I understood the question right.
Well, going back to the teachers doing SLOs, that really tailors the professional development in their area, and then we can leverage some of those dollars to fit what their needs are.
Got it. Sorry, Christine, did you want in on this as well? Sorry. You're okay? Okay, good. Thank you, and we can follow up more afterwards as well. I know we're running short on time. Any final burning question that I've...
I think the young lady in yellow.
Sorry, hi. How are you? I'm good. Good to see you.
Hi, my name is Faye, and I'm in Senator Durbin's office. My question is, all of you have really touched on the role of mentorship and coaching, the relationship to that and evaluation, and I haven't heard anyone say that there's a punitive relationship to evaluation, which I think is sort of hopefully further and further in the past, and also mirroring the pattern towards what we're seeing in school discipline as well. So that and connecting it to what you all were saying about having open schools and bringing folks in and sharing your classrooms, I'm interested in how both of those things look in connecting the elementary years to the middle school years to the high school years. And what does that look like? How can the mentorship approach be used to sort of bolster those connections? And see greater retention throughout the continuum.
Great. A lot there. Thoughts?
I'm not clear on the question.
So basically, if you're a middle school teacher or an elementary school teacher, how is that getting connected to where you're trying to get kids to be when they go to high school? And likewise, how can high school teachers and high school administrators be, mentored to understand more where the kids are coming from in the early
an interesting
years?
question, right? Because we have each level represented. I think the question is, how do we feed up the levels and create a single continuum and are working with teachers on those transitions and that progression?
Yes.
Good.
Yes, and making it go both ways.
Good.
Okay.
I think from my perspective, there's a real benefit to being in rural northern Michigan. And we only have 4,000 students in our countywide school district, and that affords the opportunity that administrators, teachers are frequently together. So there's always, I'd be interested to hear from a larger district's
A little bit
perspective
larger.
how that works.
So specifically in our district, New York City, but then we have 32 districts within that. We have a continuum now that was just put in place, but I was part of one of the focus groups that did suggest this, that the superintendents actually have a whole linkage of within the district, elementary, middle, high school. So there's no longer a separation of the high school. So the link in the bridge is there for an understanding of. But I think it really starts, if you really want to go to the top, it starts with our new next generation standards. Everything will be bridged and linked through the standards. If you know what's going on in the elementary, in the middle, and the high school, then you're on board through education, through instruction. That's paramount. Everything else will go into place because we're bridging, we're accelerating. Elementary is accelerating algebra for all in New York City in 5th grade. 8th grade, in our 8th grade, we do what we call in New York State regions, which is in another state, your accelerated courses for high school. We're already doing them in 8th grade. In our school alone, we do 4 of them in high school. They're already meeting most of the high school regions. So the point is that every state is going to have a bridge and a link, and I think that one of the common links will be the next generation standards, as was with the core curriculum.
And I appreciate the question because we've been talking a lot about the school as unit of change, right? But the notion of how we handle the progressions across. Christine, did you have other thoughts on this?
Well, I work very closely with all of my feeder schools. So we use a cluster approach. So all of the elementary and middle schools that feed into my high school, and each one of our high schools have utilized this approach to making sure that we're understanding who our students are, who's coming to me. I know what's going on at the elementary. They know what we need at the high school. And so we work together as a cluster and are very collaborative. And we meet frequently as the principals in our cluster so that we know exactly what's happening in our community of schools.
Very good. I'm pushing our time on this lightning round. Yes, ma'am. Hi, I'm Lauren. Where were you guys when we were earlier talking? No, I'm just kidding. Good. Go ahead, please.
Writing it down. We need to
Good, good.
Thank you. My name's Lauren. I'm from Congressman Tim Ryan's office. And my question is, we know there's a national conversation around school discipline, impacting kids of color, low-income students, students with disabilities more harshly. And so my question is, as the building leaders, how are you, or what professional development approach, or using ESSA dollars for this professional development around equity, restorative justice, those type of ideals to get your students and your teachers in a better place, as we know that often predicts life outcomes for kids?
Yeah, great question. Laura?
This is a great question.
Laura was really excited at the
I'm
moment you
excited
started
about this.
asking, so
Why?
I knew where I was going first. But I'll go down the line. Go ahead.
Well, New York City has put in a new discipline code, as you know, and then there's certain levels of that there is the K to 2 has a different code altogether, meaning we're really looking at the social emotional. But we are looking at a whole new growth mindset. So growth mindset is the umbrella, and underneath the growth mindset are your mental wellness centers that are in many, many schools now. We personally have brought in what we call our brain power activities. So under our growth mindset, we are doing growth mindset, which is the umbrella, and then the activities under it, the brain power. So we do the 1-minute brain breaks and things that if the class is coming in and they're energized and you want to calm them down, you'll do a 1-minute brain break. Social emotional learning, which is sponsored and through the Title II professional development monies that all the schools are getting the social emotional. So there's a lot of activity now in order to meet the needs of the students who have other than academic issues going on, so that we can curtail things that might be going on, the mediation, the talking, the conversation. You need to have those conversations and discussions ongoing so that we are preventive and not reactive, proactive and not reactive.
Christine, did you have thoughts on this as well?
Yes, so in our school district, we have continuously reviewed and revised our student code of conduct. We have a huge grant to provide restorative practices and training in our schools. We offer lots of mindfulness training. We're finding that that is really helping our students as well as staff when we're talking about mindfulness training. At Gaithersburg High School, we also have a wellness center, and we're able to address students not only their physical wellness, but mental health. And we have bilingual counselors as well. And then we also had created a few years ago a huge program in the summer to focus on the transition to high school to help our 9th graders, because that's where we were having the bulk of disciplinary problems with our 9th graders. So we have incorporated a transition program in the summertime that we call the Trojan Experience, that we have found has really helped us with our 9th graders coming to high school. And then it's just important, we go back to what we've been talking about a lot today, is professional development for our staff. How do you engage students in the instruction process, and how do we change how we teach to students who are used to being engaged every day? The things that they do when they go home, is not sit and listen to. They don't just go home and sit and watch TV. They're engaged with technology and media, and how do we use those strategies to teach our students today? How do we work with English language learners and students who are struggling readers? So that professional development goes back to that.
Eric, did you want to say something on this too?
Oh, I was just going to say that we implemented second steps, social emotional learning this past year. Last year, we really did an initiative with the restorative justice piece, which was huge. We saw a reduction in office referrals by 20% over a year-long period. Obviously, so many schools are doing PBIS, which is a huge cornerstone as well. You know, and I wanted to give a shout out to a school that I visited outside of Indianapolis. It's Perry Township Schools, and this school, you want to talk about needing interventions for kids. They have an enrollment of 16,000 students. So it's a nice sized school district, but 4,500 are learning English as a second language. And to visit that school, 72 different languages are spoken in a district of 16,000, which is really tremendous. And when I visited, they said, you know, we're doing great things, and they are. The integration that's going on is amazing from full immersion. But they said we can do so much more, and so, tying it back into the what we were talking about. So many of the students are coming from their political refugees, and to hear some of the stories of what some of these little ones in first, second grade have experienced, they need the support.
So really appreciate the question. I think just highlights so well. We know the potential of more restorative practices in terms of equity, in terms of safety, in terms of culture, but look at the time, the leadership commitment, the capacity commitment to make these changes. So it's just another great example that wouldn't have come out if you hadn't asked. Thanks for asking the question. We're really closing short on time, but I don't want to cut off particularly anyone from, or any of the panelists, which I'm going to come to in a second. But go ahead, please.
Lauren, right? It was such a powerful question because it not only lends to the students' discipline, but the teachers. And you talk about retention of the teachers. There comes a point in the teacher's career also that they need this rejuvenation, and they need to have the help with the wellness and the looking at the classroom in a different way. And all of these strategies and the growth mindset and the mindful, maybe it's different semantics, same thing, same programs. The brain power and the activities. This really supports the teachers in the classroom. And they have embraced it, and it is an amazing, powerful, powerful situation.
So let me bring us home then with this. I want to give each of you a chance to have a final word, but as we're getting close to time, encourage you to think about what's most important. We have a room of wonderful, dedicated professionals who work in Congress and at the federal level around education issues. We have a room full of people who are players in the national education space. Having heard all of this today, what do you think is the most important thing or things that you want to leave them with, again, in terms of principal leadership, in terms of the role of policy or funding or other things? Let me just give you a second for a closing thought, and then we'll wrap it up, and I know you'll be able to stick around for folks who have other questions. So, Christine, do you mind if we start with you this time and come down the line?
So I was going to go back to my mantra of leadership matters, that it's important that you understand the critical role of principals and other school leaders in our schools, and that funding for Title II, full funding, more funding, is essential to the work that we do each and every day in order for us to provide the professional development that's needed to move our colleagues along with what they need to do as instructional leaders. Decreasing class sizes, being more robust in the funding is going to be important so that we can provide what we need for our schools to be more effective.
Thank you. Eric?
I guess I would encourage you to go into schools and ask principals what Title II means to them. It is everything, folks. And I guess my parting comment would be, and this was an excellent perspective. Mr. Tyler Salyer, he's a principal in Colliersville, Tennessee, and I shot videos of administrators in the field, and I asked him if you could send one message to Washington D.C., what would it be? And he said, engage us in the conversation. So not necessarily reaching out to us, but reach out to your local constituencies and get a perspective from the field and engage in the conversation. And I know that many of you, most of you already do that, but our colleagues in the field are there to offer perspective. So please call on them.
Great. And Laura?
So, So policy can and must provide continued support for principals to strengthen and maximize the potentials within the teaching and learning school community to ensure ESSA, success for all learners.
Wow, that was very succinct. Thank you.
Very.
Excellent. And I know there's a lot embedded within that. Let me just do a couple of closing thoughts and thank yous before we let you come up and speak to these wonderful representatives directly. First, thanks to Senator Klobuchar and her office for helping us to arrange this space. Thank you to NASSP, NAESP, AFSA, Danny, Zach, everyone for putting together this great event. I'll remind folks that this is just the beginning of National Principals Month. Check out the further events and webinars on the website, and there is a Twitter chat tonight. There may be a handle or something on that screen that I can't quite see in the sunlight, but there is a Twitter chat tonight around these issues tonight at 8 p.m. I'd encourage you to join that, even if I'm such a Luddite that I don't know exactly how to do that. And finally, let me thank Tiara for her great presentation, and lastly, this wonderful panel that, again, is doing so much to lead not only their schools, but their nation on these issues. You're a fantastic resource, and I hope and look forward to everyone coming up and hounding you after this session for more information. So thank you very much. And we are right on time. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the additional food, and let's keep the conversations going. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, all
Very
you
nice
guys.
job.
Well done. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Really.
My first.
Very
I
impressive.
love this.